Hi, this is Amber,
And this is Lisa.
and you're listening to Unexplained Arkansas, a new podcast that explores urban legends, mysteries, and the unsolved in the natural state.
We're just two best friends discussing the unexplained in Arkansas.
Hello, and welcome to Unexplained Arkansas. This is Amber,
And this is Lisa.
and we have had a little bit of technical difficulty to start out the evening, but I think we got everything under control now.
Maybe.
We'll see. Oh my goodness. Can't believe we both said that at the same time. Yeah, so this is our first time. This is our first time back. And it's only been a week and a half. Yeah. A little over a week.
We were spring breaking it.
Yes. How was your spring break?
It was wonderful and beautiful, a little chilly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now, where did you go?
We went to Miramar Beach. In
Beach.
Florida. It is between Destin and Panama City. Right there at that 30A, everybody just raves about for some reason. But it was beautiful. I love Destin on. Like anything Destin on, the further away from like Alabama.
I apologize to all of our Alabama listeners. Sorry.
Just the the beach situation, the ocean. So gets prettier and prettier. So.
Hey, you know what? I like a little trip to Biloxi every now and then. So there you go. That's the difference in me and you. Biloxi's in Mississippi, not Alabama. But anyway, okay. So I went to Dallas, and then I did some running around within the state. And when we were in Dallas, we did all the JFK stuff, which was cool. I had never been to the Book Depository Museum, but it was top notch. I really appreciated the whole thing. I thought it was really worth the money. I really had a good time. It was really a fun little short trip. We stayed in a hotel called Hotel Indigo. That was the first Hilton hotel that actually bore the name Hilton back in like the 1920s. Yes.
Okay.
So the hotel itself was 100 years old, and we stayed on the 13th floor. It was really funny because when the woman handed me my card and it said 1307, I was like, no, I must give it back to her because I was like, I am not staying on the 13th floor. And I thought that a lot of hotels didn't have a 13th floor. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think you're wrong. I think that I have seen that where they skipped that number.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that's something to explore. Interesting.
Yeah, I really think that a lot of hotels don't even have a 13th floor. Well, newer ones, I guess.
Yeah.
But they go straight from 12 to 14. I didn't hear anything go bump in the night except for people really loud walking down the hall. I did not.
Or were they people?
Oh, they might not have been people. That's true. Maybe I heard ghosts the whole time, but I was just so tired I didn't care. I'm like, whatever.
You're like, whatever. I just need some sleep.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love Dallas.
Yeah. And then I went to Buc-ee's a couple of times because I guess apparently that's what you do.
Yeah, evidently. We passed to Buc-ee's coming and going, but we did not stop there.
Man, in Arkansas, that's like a cardinal sin right there.
I know. I'm like, you seen one, I mean, we just stopped at one in January, so I was like, I'm good.
I got the little nuggets. What are they called? The beaver nuggets, which is a terrible name, by the way. And I got 2 bags of them. Okay. They're okay.
What are they?
They kind of, to me, they're like the puffed corn, like what is that pop stuff we used to, the cereal, the corn pops. It's kind of like corn pops, I guess, but it tastes a little bit like Cracker Jacks. So it's like a cross between corn pops and Cracker Jacks, and supposedly it's one of their best sellers. Now, I did have the barbecue sandwich, and that was really good.
Daryl likes the barbecue. He did that. I was irritated when we stopped, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm a frozen Coke gal, or Coke Icy, and we stopped, and they had like all these ices, like all these flavors. They even had Dr. Pepper, but they did not have Coke. And I'm like,
that's funny.
I'm like, are you kidding me? And this was on the way to Dallas because we went there in January. So
yeah.
So true story.
Yeah.
So, and you also stopped in Falk.
I did.
That was that same trip.
That was the same trip.
Yes. At the Monster Mart.
At the Monster Mart. And this was from the previous episode. And I just couldn't wait on you, I guess, because we had talked about going. But there's also the Falk Monster Festival at the end of April, which I would like to go to that too. But, you know, we stopped, we went in, we did the little, it's a self-guided tour. It's all it's all the stuff from the movies. It's a big old footprint. It's newspaper clippings, and then there's, let me think, 3 or 4 life-size squatches. Wait, no, there's 3. There's 3 of them.
Okay.
2 of them I took my picture with, and the other one's like laying down in this coffin-like thing, which was really eerie.
That is creepy. You sent me some pictures, and it was creepy.
It was pretty creepy, but it was totally worth the extra 20 minutes to get to Falk, and I would totally do it again. I really thought it was a cool thing. Then we went to Boggy Creek and took some pictures around Boggy Creek itself.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, I had asked you to get me a souvenir, and you did, and I got a fancy mug, which I will post. So,
yes, and I got a fancy map. You got me a map of the United States.
I did.
I like it.
It's the national parks of the United States, and it's from the city of Seaside, which is like I don't even know if it's a city. It's like a moment in time in Florida. But anyway, Seaside, where everyone goes to get their sweatshirts and stuff, they had a bookstore there. And I was like, this looks like Amber.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and it did. It looked like you. So, and you said you almost
like
bought
a
one.
big piece of the United States.
Yes. It looked like something that you would put in your office, which you will. So
yeah, probably so. You are probably correct. Or my podcasting room, because I'm redecorating that as well.
And then you can like put holes where we've been. Well, you need an Arkansas one, like all the places.
Yeah, I actually got one from the state. You know, I think I've said this on a podcast like earlier, but I tried looking everywhere for a map of Arkansas. I went to the post office. I went all over the place. I went to gas stations. I'm like, why don't they have maps anymore? Then I realized because we have GPS, who needs a map? So
exactly.
The dude at the post office said, well, why don't you look up on the state website? I think there's a way that you can get them mailed to you. And sure enough, there is. Oh, so I got like 3 maps of Arkansas mailed to me.
And he was probably thinking, why don't you just Amazon that?
Yes. Because I don't want to pay for it. You should be able to get those kinds of things for free or for a few dollars. Yeah.
But I will say the bank, I will do a plug for the bank, for Security Bank. They always put out like a map with, a map. I could have got you one. But anyway. Moving on.
I have one. And I'm going to get little pins and put into all the cities that we've been to or talked about and see how many that is. Because, you know, this is the 24th episode, so we're getting up there. It's pretty exciting.
I know. We're rocking and rolling, and it feels weird. We were talking about like it feels weird because it's been a week and a half, and we're out of sync.
I do feel a little out of sync today. I feel out of sync. You know, it's like that Sunday night before going back to work when you've been off for like a long break. It's just like gloom and doom. Oh, we got to go back to work tomorrow. That's kind of my feeling right now. So, but it'll be fine. And probably by the next time we record one, I'll be back to my peppy self. So, but this is number 24, and the idea for this one came from our listeners. We had several people ask us to research this, and so that's why we're doing number 24, which is the unknown grave on Highway 67
in Judsonia. Yes,
in Judsonia.
And this one, and so even before we got started, I had one of my dance mom friends text me when she found out what we were doing, like the podcast and stuff. And she had texted me. She was like, what about that grave? So that grave is on everybody's mind. So we're going to dive in a little bit. Okay.
Sure.
Are you ready?
Oh yeah. I was born ready.
You need a donut.
I do not.
Oh, wait.
I do not need a donut.
We're counting calories, everybody. So
I was just going to say, 1 minute you're telling me to count my calories, the next minute you're trying to shove a donut in my face. I mean, pick a side, man.
I know. I know.
This is like the third time she's offered me a donut since I've been here.
Or nachos.
Yeah, she did offer me her leftover nachos as well.
Yes, I did. Okay, so I don't know about you, but we're going to start kind of at the very beginning. Like, I was born. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to go back that far. But like growing up here in Searcy, I've passed that grave situation. So Searcy is maybe only about 3 miles. Well, I should say Judsonia, where this is about 3 miles northeast of Searcy. And so it's running along US Highway 67. In my realm of thought, like I've lived in Searcy for a long time, since the 80s, and we've always taken this Highway 67 all the way almost until you get into St. Louis area. It's like that lonesome little fenced in grave has like always been there. You just kind of see it. You don't really know about it. It's just always been there. Anywho, for me, it was like, I didn't even know until we started diving in how many graves were there. I didn't, it's like a tree. It's like on this on-ramp. It's like this little triangular, and we'll kind of we've posted some pictures, but it's like fenced in. And so if you're driving by, you can't tell that it's like one grave. I mean, it's small, but you can't tell who, what, where, So
right.
In my head, I was like, and it's got like all kinds of stuff. Like it always had like all kinds of decorations, I guess, like stuffed animals. And, so you assume it's probably a child, but you just can't see. There's like a tree, and then it's fenced in. And I've never known if it was one grave, several graves, whatever. It's always been a little bit of a mystery, because it's like, oh, we're passing this tiny little graveyard. Oh, how weird. So I'm going to take you into talking about Judsonia for a second. We're not going to dive too deep into Judsonia, because we do have an upcoming episode, like later on, whenever, that we're going to cover something that happened in Judsonia in the 1950s.
Really? What, yes. The tornado? Are we covering that?
Yes, we're going to cover the tornado. It was a huge, mega situation for the town of Judsonia. Yeah. And it actually kind of changed the whole landscape of Judsonia. But it was a very terrible event. So when we cover like that one, we're going to dive into Judsonia like really deep. But Judsonia is, like I said, 3 miles kind of northeast of Searcy. It's down the highway, and it talks about how Judsonia, the area there was called Prospect Bluff, because someone evidently was sent out to view something. They were sent from Searcy. The area was actually Prospect Bluff for a long time, and then it really eventually, for some reason, they had to survey some land out, and so they named this other area Judsonia. And then eventually, around 1872, Judsonia took over. So the name Prospect Bluff just left. But I do believe, and you Judsonians can tell me, but I believe that they do have what's called Prospect Bluff Days. Do they not? Like that's kind of a thing.
I feel like so. I've heard that.
But the area, like, again, not going to go into too much detail, but way back in the beginning, like Judsonia had an actual university. Did you know that?
I did not.
Like an actual, so they had like a professor who he was from the Chicago area. And so he came like and settled down in that area around the later 1800s, I believe. And so he actually established a college. It was like Judson University.
And wow, so I did not know that.
I know. I did not know that either. But it went out of, I guess it went bankrupt, so to speak, lost money. And so it stopped around 1888. So if that gives you an idea, it was in that time frame. So, but I thought that was very interesting. And so Judsonia is tiny. They have a great breakfast. In fact, Elle loves the chocolate gravy. Again, so many people reached out to us. Me and Amber went and checked this out in person. So the grave, it does say like there's this, chain link fence, and it's about, I'm really bad with like square footage, but do you think that's about 10 by 10?
Yeah, I would say about 10 by 10. Mm-hmm.
So it's like a space of 10 feet by 10 feet, and it's chain linked in, and you can go into it, and it is covered with, and it says, unknown baby girl. In death, she belongs to all of us. And
that's so sad.
I know. It broke our heart. I was like, oh. But that is literally all it says. Like, that's all the information that's there. But people, have taken on this, unknown baby girl as their own. And so all these people just leave stuff. And you can tell that someone's keeping up with it. So the first thing that I wanted to dive into was, like, obviously what's out there about this. A lot of people have covered this. There have been some articles. Only in Arkansas did a story on it. And then there is a TikToker that covered it. Remember, you sent that.
Yeah,
I can't remember her name.
I've seen that. I think it's Amber Vance, I think, because I remember she had the same name as me.
Yes, and she had actually reached out. So I believe she
reached out to you?
Oh, no. What I'm saying is she had reached out to get some of her information, I guess, to Shelley Churchwell, who is, like, I believe she's the head or the president of the White County Historical Society here.
Oh,
so because Judsonia is a part of White County, which Searcy is too. So anyway, so she did reach out to her. So this story has kind of gotten a little bit of, like, some stuff going on it. So it is interesting. And so I did notice that all of the articles I found say different things.
Yeah. I've heard different things. You want to hear what I've heard, and then you can tell me what's true and what's not?
Yes. I want to hear what you've heard.
Okay, so I've heard that it was a little girl that fell out of her high chair and passed away. What was the other one? I've also heard it was a little girl that got sick and the family was traveling through and they buried her. So those are the two things I've heard.
Okay, gotcha. Yes. So those are some of the information that's kind of been in the article. This article, I will say, this person, and he comes up later on, and I will talk about this, but it just says Donnie Schmidt said that his dad's cousin, who was a person named D. Hopper, used to own this ground. And so when this Donnie was about 8, he first heard this story, and then his, people in his family had kind of repeated this. And now Schmidt is an area maintenance supervisor for the Arkansas Highway and Transportation Department. And so he was responsible, I guess, for maintaining that grave, because I guess he's, that's his area. So it is being maintained by the Arkansas Highway and Transportation Department. And Schmidt said that in that same year was when he started, I guess, working for the highway department. So I guess he's worked there for a long time. He believes the headstone was placed by the department before the completion of that stretch of the highway. So this will this is kind of different stories as well. So every single thing that I've read has always been, like, different. So it does say however, the White County Historical Society claimed that the concrete headstone was designed and constructed by someone named Lewis Harris. And I'll tell you kind of probably where they got that information. This person, a person named Vera Roach, said her dad told her about the grave, and they were careful not to put the highway over it. So they saw that it was a grave when they were, surveying out and deciding on the highway. And she said that the family evidently once owned the land. According to her, the family lived in the old house that used to be there, and the family buried her out there by the tree. The tree still stands over the grave. Roach said she didn't know a lot about the girl or the events that were surrounding her death, but that's what, she heard. So this was from Vera Roach. Now, the story that Schmidt outlines in this article says the story he was told was that the family was strawberry pickers, and she had fallen out of her high chair onto a fork. Now this,
oh my gosh.
Now this is something that will come up as well. A similar story was also told to Roach, she said, except instead of a fork, it was a knife that she had taken from the table.
Oh no.
So these were stories that they had kind of been told. It did say Bald Knob Mayor Doyle Wallace had heard another story. He had heard that a wagon train, so this is probably part of what you had heard, a wagon train had come through the area and a little girl had died and they had to just bury her. So they were just kind of, rolling through. It does say, according to the White County Historical Society records, the child was about 2 years old and would have died around 1890. They thought the girl's family was poor, and the neighbors and friends placed her in a crude basket and buried her. The child still remains unknown. So this was in 1972. In a sense, she belongs to all of us, to all the parents who can translate her early death into the worst of their fears, and to those who are without children, to those who remember when their own offspring were toddlers, and to each and every one of us who holds fast to our earliest memory of those happy days when we too gazed in wonder at a world. That was, yeah. So that was all written in the White County record. That was one description of the events. Ponder that for a moment, okay?
Okay.
Sit on that. So then I did read the Only in Arkansas had done some research and had taken information from the similar places, but it said that the highway planning began in the 1960s. So this part of the highway was in the 1960s, and the highway department saw the grave and they decided that they would not try to move it. They would just build around it or whatever. And this was according to, they had evidently talked to a Bruce Street, and they said that moving the gravesite was never an option.
Well, I do have a question. Sure. I have a question about that. Okay, so when you're deciding to move graves, I mean, what goes into that decision, and how often are graveyards moved or graves moved for things like the building of a road or a home? I mean, I keep thinking about the one movie, The Poltergeist, where they move the headstones, not the people. But seriously, when do they decide to move the actual people and graves themselves? Does something have to be done legally? That's a question I've always had.
Yeah, me too. I mean,
because there's lots of these things. There's lots of these things around here, like graveyards and whatnot. If they have a freeway or a highway going that way, what do they do?
I will say there was an article that spoke about they were looking, and it was about the same subject, but they were looking at a different route, but it was going to hit an even larger cemetery, and they were like, no, can't do it.
Okay.
So I think, I mean, especially considering that this was literally one grave, I really think that if it's a grave, they're not going to touch it if at all possible. I don't think that moving bodies is something they want to get into. It doesn't sound like. I think it's a protected site, it sounds like. And that's why, in fact, they mentioned, I guess they didn't, they mentioned a small stone marker was added and the fence was erected to protect the site. And this was all according to Bruce Street. He said he was just a toddler at the time of the highway being built, which was in the 19th. And he said the site went unmaintained for several years until, according to him, Greenskeepers Garden Club took over maintenance. And he believes that they even raised the funds to purchase the nice headstone that's currently there.
Okay.
This is
according to one.
And this is according to him. So now we've got two different stories going on, even about the gravestone. It does say in 1977, and this is, again, this only in Arkansas, that just after the new highway opened, people began to notice the grave and they started asking questions about it because they were like, because I'm sure before that highway was there, this was just land. I mean, this was just land. Nobody was, you had I believe you had the old highways in existence. So this grave was not visible. I mean, it was just part of some land. So once they got the highway open and noticed it, there was evidently in 77, and they called it the Highway roadside mystery grave. It became a hot topic.
Oh, wow.
And yes. And so W.E. Orr, who served as president of the White County Historical Society during that time, he was working as the editor of the White County Record, which was the newspaper for Judsonia. They had their own newspaper.
Yeah.
And he began researching. So we will dive into that. It does say in this article that Orr died in and he lived to be the age of 86. And I'll kind of go into him because he was pretty awesome. And I did find his grave. He is buried at that Evergreen Cemetery, which you had dived into Evergreen Cemetery when you talked about when you posted the angel or the statue.
Oh,
you know, the really cool statue
anyway,
of Henson. Yes. So that Henson statue is in that Evergreen Cemetery as well. And so are a few of these other people. It was determined, according to the article, that the lone grave was dug when a small girl died. And this is also saying 1890s. Nearly 100 years had passed and little written history was available. So Orr had to set out and find people that had grown up in the area to talk to them. So we'll kind of dive into that. But this article brings up just different, stories about the actual grave marker and who did what where. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
so it's like
definitely.
It's like everywhere you turn around, there's mystery.
Yep.
Abounding.
Mystery abounding.
So what? So now I'm going to tell you more about W.E. Orr. Okay.
Okie dokie.
Okay, so when I decided, we had been talking about this, because and not just like, oh gosh, how many, probably 10 of our listeners had reached out. One of our good listeners, Kim, her husband, Travis, had recently mentioned about it. And then, like I said, I was even getting a text from my dance mom friend, Danielle. So this is on people's mind. But if you go, so I did reach out. I know Shelly through Facebook. And again, Shelly Churchwell, she is like the president of the White County Historical Society, and you can find them on the line and on Facebook, and you can contribute on the line. Yes. So I'm gonna do a little plug.
I think that should be on our new T-shirt. It should say literally or on the line.
Or allegedly. Remember?
Or allegedly.
Yes, but allegedly she is on the line. But I will say Shelly does a lot of work. And if you're from this area, so Searcy does have what's called like a Pioneer Village, which is out like at our sports complex that is really cool. And they do events out there.
Remember every time we had an extra field trip, it would always be to Pioneer Village. It seemed like they took us there every year in elementary school and middle school. And then one time,
depressing.
Well, you were there
really
too.
Fun now.
Yeah.
I don't recall. I think
you don't recall. Do you remember the time they took us to Riverside Park and
yes.
y'all told me that there were devil worshipers there? So.
Yes, because that was always the thing about Riverside Park. Like, yes, I don't know if it was just all the graffiti. Like, we need to do a whole episode on Riverside Park.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. But they took us to all kinds of crazy places in elementary school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like devil worshipping spots, aka allegedly. I'm just kidding. At least, when you're in third grade, that's what you tell people, right?
Yeah.
That was the word on the street. Okay. The street word was that devil worshippers hung out and they did all the graffiti. Because there is a ton of graffiti.
Because that's what they do. Devil worshippers do is graffiti things.
Evidently.
Oh, wow.
This was the 90s. No, this wasn't even the 90s. Was it?
Yeah, it was barely. Yeah. It was like 90, barely? I guess, when we were in third grade.
80.
Yeah.
80.
Okay, we're okay, getting off the subject.
We are getting really off subject. Okay, so I did reach out to Shelly because I figured she would know a lot about this grave situation, and she did, of course. And so she sent me this article. The other article had mentioned W.E. Orr had put together some research. So he would have been researching this in the 1970s. Okay. And he would have been doing this as, he was also part of the White County Record, and that was Judsonia's newspaper. And again, he wasn't president at that time of the White County Historical Society. It says that he was president during 1963 to 64. I don't know if he just felt like 1 year was enough, or what, but I don't know. That's interesting. I would like to know more about that, Shelley, if you're listening. But anyway, but his first name is actually William. And I did find out a lot of information about him, which I'll dive into, which is funny. So this is his little article about this. Okay. So he's very righty.
He's what?
He's a right. He does write a book about his
righty.
He's righty.
Is that what
you like that?
He's righty.
Yes, he's very righty. So he starts out.
I'm not sure what to think about that. Am I righty? Because I write all the time.
Maybe. I'm just laughing, but yeah, he's very authory. You like that one?
Yes.
He starts out this article. He says, "The way of a historian is hard. It is the same even though your efforts only center around a family, a town, or a county." So this is how he starts it. Isn't that funny? He said,
I guess in some ways it's true. I mean, it's not as hard as, let's say, being a truck driver. I mean, that seems like that would be a little harder than writing.
I'm going to say this, but when I was younger, I thought I'm either going to be a judge or I wanted to drive a big truck.
Hey,
and now
I wanted to do that before.
I'm like, I hate to drive in general. So I do not want to drive a big truck. And if you're a big truck driver, I'm sorry, but like I always get so like, I'm always scared of you and you're driving and I'm just worried that you can't see us.
Scared of you when I was in Dallas a few days ago. Oh my gosh, I was on that 5-lane highway and I'm just shaking thinking about it. But anyway, go ahead. All right, so writing is hard. We know this. Right.
No, he said being a historian is hard. Being a historian.
Okay. I was zoning in on the writing.
You were zoning in on the writing, but no, he says being a historian is hard. And I agree, especially when you look at this story because there's so many tales. So I get that. I think that's what he's trying to say. So he does say it's hard to kind of hit and explore all of the folklore and find out the true like legal stuff, like the real stuff. And then he says it is fun when you actually discover new evidence. He said when it came to the highway, so this is what they call this, the Highway Roadside Mystery Grave, which is where he began to hear about this in July of 1977. So he wasn't even really zoning in on this until 1977. And again, that other article had mentioned that was when that part of the highway was done. And that's when people were starting to be like, hey, there's a grave there. That would be pretty crazy. So he does say he was the editor. And then his first news story was had advised his readers that if you turn right from Highway 157 to the new freeway, which is the Highway 67, and we'll also talk about the future of that, you will find a mini park. It's surrounded by and he calls it a mini park, but it's surrounded by a fence. I mean, it's tiny. I wouldn't even call it a park, but surrounded by a fence and shaded by what is probably the only tree left in the 4-lane highway complex. A great many drivers. So. Yes, and probably still. And as they drive eastward for the purpose of this, they're going that way. It says the fence surrounds the grave of an unknown child. And it said when the engineers were running their surveys, they were told of this isolated burial spot, I guess, by the landowners. So they were kind of told about it. And the highway department evidently had a heart, and they demonstrated that by, this says the grave was marked and protected by the highway department. And then he does go in to say there are different stories about that. So some say that the grave was dug for the child of a poverty-stricken family who could not afford to bury their child like in that Evergreen Cemetery, which is where Orr himself, like evidently at that time, he's saying the Evergreen Cemetery had already been in existence for about 16 years or so in the 1890s. But I guess it was quote unquote expensive. Like you had to, they just didn't have the money.
I've been to that cemetery several times, and there are some graves that date way, way back into the early 1900s, late 1800s. Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, definitely. Because I went tromping through there today. We won't discuss that, but anyway, I tried to call. Well, I didn't call you. I texted you because you told me you were going to take a nap. And I said, "Are you sleeping?"
True
and you
story.
didn't respond. You didn't respond for 2 hours.
Because I was taking a nap.
You were sleeping. So he said the other story that you don't know about, it says others say that a party of Indians came through and left behind the little tribal princess who died in Judsonia.
Native Americans?
This, in 1977, they were Indians, but yes, Native Americans. So okay. I'm just reading from him. Yes. So we had, I think they call it indigenous people, Amber. So there.
Okay.
We had, he said, we had most of the details of the solutions in order. So he's talking about editing, like he had this information. So the second story that he did was July 14th of 77. It said Judsonia's mystery grave was featured on the front page of the July 6th edition. So this was front page news. It said it was a grave. I know. I mean, this is 1977 news. Hey.
Yeah.
Baby. This says the grave of a baby girl not quite 2 years old, and according to this article, died in a high chair accident sometime around the years of 1890, 1891. It said D. Hopper of Route 1 Judsonia says that the mound has been there as long as he can remember. So do you remember me talking about D. Hopper, that evidently his family had owned, according to that other article,
owned the land?
Yes, they had owned the land. And he had heard the story of its origin from older members of his family. According to Hopper's information, the child died of a knife wound, which she received when her high chair tipped over. It's terrible.
Oh my gosh.
I know. In some manner, the baby had taken a large knife from the table. And all of this doesn't really add up to me. But anyway, she had taken a large knife from the table near which her chair had been placed. And then by shoving against the table, she had managed to overturn her chair, and the knife plunged into her chest when she fell to the floor.
Oh, no.
Yes. And then it said her family were tenants on the farm, and they were very poor and could not afford to have their child buried in the Evergreen Cemetery, which had been there, like I said, for 16 years at the time of this. It said the owner of the farm at that time was a man by the name of Bunt, with an E on the end. His land adjoined Mr. Hopper's parents, Jesse Hopper and Clara and Smith Hopper. And with the help of their neighbors and friends, they basically made a crude casket, and it was constructed, and the baby's body was buried in a fence corner. That later adjustments were made in the property lines, and the grave was found to be within the Hopper holdings. So this is all according to D. Hopper. It did say among those in attendance at the child's funeral was a Mrs. Callie Huff. I'm going to get into these particulars in a moment because I did look up some information, but she was a longtime resident, and she said Mrs. Huff often told of the circumstances surrounding the death of the baby and described the scene at the funeral. D. Hopper's mother, that would have been Clara, and then aunts and uncles made a sort of woodland shrine out of the little mound and put flowers which grew all over, that part of the county. It said Hopper had reasons to believe that the baby's name was Cousins. And I don't know the last name. Years ago, after hearing the tale once more, he jotted down the name on an old ledger. The years went by and he had forgotten that he had jotted that down. And so he could barely kind of read it, but he did make out Cousins. He had no clue to the baby's first name. And it did say when surveys were made, for the new highway in 1965, Mr. Hopper took the information that he had to the Arkansas Highway Department officials. And at that time, it seemed probable that the new 4-lane complex would actually follow a route to which it was eventually this route, but later they favored a different route, which showed them more near Bald Knob. But that highway, this is what I was getting into, would pass by a multiple grave cemetery. And so that was just too many problems. There was there was no way to do that. So the engineers then chose the present route, and the small grave fell within that jurisdiction. The fence was erected according to Hopper. A tree was allowed to remain at the side of the mound, and this small grave, it says remains, to this day with the concrete ribbons and whatnot. So it does say the grave. It goes into talk more about what other people said. So the record reported that some say the grave was actually dug for a child of a poverty-stricken family, but others really felt like the party of Indians or indigenous people came this way years ago and left behind the little Indian princess who died here. And this is according to this article. In all traditions, there is generally some basis of fact, but they say that a Mrs. Martha Wright had told the record that even though there was an Indian princess, she is definitely not buried in the Highway 64 mini grave. Now, this is 64. This was actually Highway 67. So that was a mistype or miscalculation. But Mrs. Wright remembers the incident well. She says years ago that a migrant party of indigenous people came to the home of a Dr. Burkhausen. And that's interesting. Dr. Burkhausen was the father of Mrs. Wright. So this was her dad. They came and said they needed a white man's doctor, that their little girl, the princess, was very sick. And then Mrs. Wright had felt the forehead of the child. And she said it was incredibly hot, horrible high fever. It said that the doctor's daughter placed a towel soaked in the cold water and tried to cool her off. And she did say that her father wasn't there and that they definitely needed a doctor. So to take her into Judsonia right now, that's what she had told them to do. She said that the party of indigenous people camped out in the outskirts of town. And that night, according to her, the little princess died either secretly or with permission. The party took the small body to a spot just outside the northern boundary of Evergreen Cemetery and buried it there. It was the 3rd day of July, according to her. So she's saying that there was a princess, because the story, has been that there could have been a princess that came through. I know. Mrs. Wright believes that a large stone may still mark the gravesite, but the lot is covered with heavy brush now. And there is to the right of that cemetery, it is all wooded. So who knows? Yeah. It is all wooded. And then it does say there was a lot of unmarked graves throughout this period, of all kinds of people that, you just have to bury. It did say that they did an editorial in 1972, and it just mentioned, even with additional data revealed, the child remains are unknown. In a sense, and that's when they go into, in a sense, she is for all of us. So that's why the marker says, in death, she belongs to all of us.
All of us.
So, yes. Now, it did go into, this is the part about the Lewis Harris. So, some people, I guess, William E., and I'll get into something funny about him here in a second. So, W.E. Orr, he had talked to the mayor, it says Bill Stutz, and they became interested in this whole project of finding out who it was. But they said a Lewis Harris actually designed and constructed the concrete tombstone, and then flowers mysteriously would appear, from time to time. So he was the one that actually put that tombstone in place. But it doesn't say the time frame. And of course, this was all written in 1977. So if this is the case, then it was written that long ago. Now I'm going to tell you some things.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I am going to tell you a little bit about W.E. Orr, because like I said, he was very, very awesome. So he has a whole monument type thing in Judsonia. He has this whole arch thing kind of contributed to him. But he was actually a teacher, and he was the school superintendent. And so he, at that time, that just meant that he did everything. He would do, basically you were principal, teacher, you would teach, you would hire, he would do the hiring, he would manage everything. He would teach whatever classes they couldn't find a teacher for, and he coached girls basketball.
Oh, wow. That's a lot. That is a lot.
I know. And he did this for 43 years. So he was at the time, so Judsonia actually had its own school district, and now Judsonia and Kensett have kind of combined, and they're under what's called the Riverview School District, which in Judsonia, you have, I believe, the elementary and middle school still, because that was across from the cemetery today. But the actual Riverview, I think some of the junior high school is actually in Searcy. It's located in Searcy. But that's what happened to him. But he, evidently, in the 1940s, he had built the South's most spectacular tournament, which was the girls' county basketball tournament, which drew in 10,000 people to the area of Judsonia.
Oh, wow.
And we're talking the town was 1,800 or is 1,800 people. Yeah. So that is amazing. So he said the first tournament that he held, he did everything from beauty reviews. He had
what's a beauty review?
I mean, this is the 1940s. So I have a feeling that a beauty review is like a beauty pageant.
Oh, okay.
I have a feeling.
All right, come here.
Someone tell me if I'm wrong.
Let me review your looks. Let me review your beauty.
Hey, tell me, what did I tell you I look like today? I was like, I'm half PJs and half church.
Church. You said church wear. You said I'm wearing half PJs, half church wear.
Yes, that's me right now still. This is how I went to the cemetery and walked around as well. And that's no surprise to anyone that knows me. But anyway, he mentions that he had the beauty reviews, he had orchestras playing, he had style shows, he had circuses.
Circuses.
Wow. He had vaudeville. I don't know what any of this is. He had vaudeville, fireworks.
That's like singing and dancing, I think. Like vaudeville shows. Yeah.
He had it all. He had an elephant.
Oh, wow.
I'm serious. This article about him says he rented a bull elephant from some carnies.
Nice.
And then he said people came to see the elephant.
Did you just say carny?
That's what I said. So this article is by Heber Taylor, and it's talking about.
He used the word carny.
He used the word carny.
Okay, I'm just checking. My God,
I took a book to the beach, and it said carnies in it as well.
Yeah,
and the time frame was the 90s. So just saying. I think carnival workers. Do you like that? Carnival workers. Okay. It did say for 5 years during his service, he was also during that same time as being a superintendent. He was also the Judsonia editor of the newspaper.
Oh, wow! He did a lot.
I know, and he was commuting 30 miles a night or 2 a week to get the paper out. And he got this paper circulation up to 2,000. And we're talking a community that's only has 1,800.
Yeah, pretty cool.
I mean, he's amazing. And then he and I guess it says his older daughters, they put out That's Judsonia. So I guess it was about That's Judsonia. Maybe, doesn't that sound like a show? That's Judsonia. I love it. But it says he didn't get married. I couldn't really.
Sorry. I'm just still thinking about that.
Are you thinking about the elephant and the carnies? That's Judsonia.
The bull elephant and the carnies and the vaudeville shows in Judsonia. I wish there were photos.
Me too. Yeah. But he did say he was doing the newspaper, and I told you he also wrote a book. So he has a manuscript.
When did he have time? I didn't even have time to do any laundry today. I mean, how in the world does he have time to get all this done?
I don't know. He was amazing. But he worked, a long time, but like I said, he was really amazing. He was working 60-hour weeks. I mean, he was doing it all. So I really wanted to look into him. I wanted to look at the time frames, and I really wanted to dive in and see if I could find more about these cousins. So let me bear with me, my note. I wrote down all these dates, and now I can't find them. Can you believe it?
Yes, I can. I can definitely believe it.
Okay, I found it. So my thing is, this D. Hopper had a lot to say, okay? So Dee, his time frame of life was 1913 to 1985. Okay. And his parents, so his dad was Jesse, was not born until 1880.
Oh, okay.
And his mother was born in 18.
Okay.
So the article and everything made it sound like his parents remembered all this, were giving all this information, but his parents, I mean, in my head, there's no way that this can line up. This baby girl is like, she either happened later on than what they're thinking.
Right.
Now, it did say that this Mrs. Callie Huff, she was a longtime resident and she had been there. So she is the only person that her dates of life could have aligned, because it said that she was born in 18. And so she would have been, right there. I mean, 23, 24 at this time of when this alleged, funeral was happening.
Right.
But the D. Hopper's parents definitely wouldn't, and his parents definitely wouldn't have been owning this land. I mean, they could have owned this land later on that had this grave, but basically there's no way that his parents were part of, because it does talk about how they were the ones that made this, woodland arch and such. So it really made it sound like his parents were part of this situation, but there's not a physical way that they could have. So that's what I found.
Interesting.
I know. So
yeah.
So I'm debunking, unfortunately, some of this information, but my thoughts on this were that, and I'm still going to look at, I tried to find more connections. Like I tried to find the grave of this Mrs. Callie Huff. But so what I did find, the U.S. Census of Arkansas, they were all burned. They went down in a warehouse fire in 1922.
What? Really?
Yes, girlfriend. So I tried to get all this, because I was thinking, well, if I can find census, and I did look, I Googled, I went to the cemetery. I went everywhere I could to try to see if I could find anyone with the last name Cousins, and there was nothing. And then I was trying to look at the U.S. Census in the area, and there's no way to look at that census. And I did see, like on the internet, that it said that the warehouse was burned, the Arkansas.
Did you do any kind of ancestry search with that?
I did look at like all of the Hopper stuff, and then this Huff, and then tried to, any Googling of any cousins in the area was not popping up. So nothing was popping up with any of that information. And I tried to even look, like thinking, okay, well, just trying to find people that could have been related, but there wasn't anything.
Right. Because that's one of those things that, probably like you said, finding it out from a family member or somebody that was around during the time is probably going to be the only way that we can get an accurate representation of what happened. But then again, on the other hand, that's also how rumors start as well. So, but if oral tradition is all that's left for some of these stories, that's what you have to rely on.
Yeah. So even
like that's where we're at.
Yes. So even W.E., which he was willing. So the funny thing about him that I was going to say, and I don't understand where this comes from. So anybody that does, please phone us in.
Phone us in. Yes. But our 1-800 number is down at the bottom of the screen. No, I'm kidding.
Yes. So anywho, we like W.E., even on his tombstone, it says like William, I think it's like William Edgar or something, maybe. Edgar. But then it says Skinny in the quotations. So his nickname was Skinny. And he even had that on his
Skinny.
Okay. I'll get into something else. But like it's even on his tombstone, Amber. Like that's how much, like that was like evidently his thing. Like everybody called him Skinny. Yeah. Skinny Orr. And it's Lucky on duck. His tombstone. I know. So I wonder, I'm guessing it was because he was so skinny. I don't know. But anyway, phone us in, email us on that if you know anything about his nickname being Skinny. But and if you know
this, there is a lot of rich history in the Judsonia area. There's lots of really cool things to just kind of look at, and the cemetery has the Henson statue that's really cool, and then of course
we really need to do an episode on her.
Yeah, we do. We will eventually. And then, we have the Judsonia Bridge that's really cool and scares me to death. I won't go over it.
Is it that wooden one? Oh, yeah.
It's the wood.
Remember that day we were out there and I was like, oh goodness, I cannot get out there because Daryl's going to kill me if I get my car stuck on this wooden bridge. It's like a 1-lane wooden
it's a
bridge.
One-lane wooden bridge. There's not too many of those around anymore.
It's
those
really
one-lane
cool.
wooden bridges.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's really
I don't
neat.
like going over it. Now I have, but I don't like to go over it because I don't like to go over anything that is made of wood and not concrete.
And it is still this is a what do you call that? An active bridge. There was people all over. In fact, that day we got, I think, did I get the finger? Did she give me the finger? Or remember there was an incident.
You got the bird that day. Yes, you did get the bird that day.
I heard I was watching some crime show that the Italian finger, they called it the Italian finger. But anyway, I don't know why they said that. But anyway, she gave me the Italian finger. And I'm half Italian, so I was
you're on that bridge, I can't get stuck here, I can't. And I'm like, well, just drive.
I ended up backing up a million. I'm not good in reverse. But anyway, it was an adventure. So if anyone is hanging out in Judsonia, you should do some things like eat at KJ's.
Yeah, definitely.
Eat at KJ's. Hang out
Visit
on the
Laura
old
Lee Henson's grave.
Oh, and Skinny Orr's grave. He's in the same cemetery.
Yeah.
And I will say that Huff, which I could not find it. Evidently, I'm not good at finding graves, but that Mrs. Callie Huff, and Dee Hopper, they are all out there in the Evergreen Cemetery. So.
Oh, and Laura Lee Henson's grave. I'm kind of looking some of this up online while we're talking. And
on the line.
Yeah, on the line. Laura Lee Henson's grave, the marker that is so famous, and we actually used some photos I took of that marker in some of our promo stuff.
Yes.
But her grave marker is that of a mourner that's scattering flowers. And that was a really popular marker during the Victorian era. So very cool.
It's very, very cool. And there are a lot of interesting markers out there. I guess several from older time periods and especially if they were service members or whatever, but there's a lot going on out there at the Evergreen Cemetery. So definitely check that out.
Maybe there's some ghosts going on too. Maybe.
Well,
if there was a haunted cemetery, it would be that one.
It probably would. And I will throw in the one last tidbit on this. I believe it was, the Historical Society. I can't find my note on that, but they did say they felt like the story about the indigenous people coming through was false because they had said, I believe this was, with the Historical Society, they said that the indigenous tribes were gone by this. And so I don't know what's fact or fiction here because there's so many different stories, but they felt like the indigenous people coming through was not accurate information. So more than likely it was a tenant farmer, just someone that did not have the money to, bury their loved one, their little child in the actual cemetery. So that's my thoughts. But I am going to look more into this. I did try to look at some land deeds. So I might do a follow-up, just a little,
Yeah. We have several stories that I think that need to be followed up on because we did so many interesting ones at the very, very beginning when we were just kind of getting the hang of this. So I would like to do follow-ups on the Cave City and and Cushman Caves and things like that. So we will do follow-ups eventually, probably this summer when we have more time.
I think we dived into about all we could on the Blue Man Group cave.
Okay, that was pretty funny.
If you haven't heard that one, please go listen.
Yeah,
please. So
the Blue Man Group.
Okay, just to finish up I think we're finished with the story, but to finish up some business. So you were going to read that awesome review we had on it.
I had gotten it on my phone here a second ago, and then I started bird walking and looking up Judsonia things. So this is from Ashley, and the title is Absolute Fave with looks like 5 exclamation points. All right, and 5 stars. So awesome. If you're looking for the perfect podcast, like one that rates up there with Ashley and Britt from Crime Junkies, this is it. Ambi and Lisa have the most. Okay, let me.
I love it.
Ambi and Lisa have the most calming mom voices that right up there with my mom. And yes, my mom listens too. Literally, the only thing I would change is having an episode every day. I know that isn't possible, so I'll just check my phone like a love-struck teenager until they upload a new one. That is so sweet. That has been my favorite one we've gotten so far.
Yes,
that's so cute.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it.
Yes, we love all of you so much. And to say that we have mom voices, I love that because we are moms and we care. And I do want to say, I mean, this really bothered me. I think everyone's been watching the story of the what's his name in Nashville that went missing.
Oh, the Riley Strain.
Yes, Riley Strain.
I've been keeping up with that.
And he was missing, and they were looking for him, and then of course this past week they did find him, and I'm like, my heart breaks for his mom.
Yeah, mine too.
And his mom had mentioned to hold your babies tight. So anyway, we are mothers, and we love everyone, and we'll mother you all. So a few things: buckle and don't hang out around rivers. And I don't know, I hope they'll come out with what happened so his family can get some closure. But, I guess my thought was maybe someone, drugged him or something, I don't know.
I mean, I couldn't even begin to, I've read everything about that because, I have a teenager that's about to be college age. And so I really worry about things like that. Like on the regular, I worry about that.
Yeah.
And, I just tell my child, never leave your drink unattended. Just
never accept a drink from a stranger.
And that's what happened because,
who knows?
But I'm sure hopefully an autopsy will be done and they'll be able to see what was in his system. So I think that eventually we will know exactly what was going on, what was in his system. But when you're in a place like that, and I go to Nashville all the time.
Yes.
And I tend to stay away from Broadway, even though my son really wants to, play guitar and do all the things. He said yesterday that he's moving to Franklin after college graduation.
Make him save his money.
Oh, God. Well,
good luck.
I'd rather him live in Franklin than in downtown Nashville.
It's very nice.
He's taking his little guitar and moving to Franklin. But, even taking him as much as I do to kind of, get used to the Nashville area, it scares me. It really does because there is a lot going on in that town. And it seems like it's gotten a little bit, let's say, it's become more of a party city in the last few years than I think it's ever been. And, whatever. I'm a mom. I'm not a partier.
We're moms.
Right? We're moms. We're not partiers. However, you do have to always be careful. You have to always, think about, worst case scenario. I know that sounds kind of morbid, but that's what I always tell my kids, just kind of think about, what could happen and how you could prevent that from happening.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad to have to live your life like that, but there's crazy people, which is, why we have these podcasts.
Yeah, no joke. We always tell each other, let's not become a podcast subject. Let's not become a podcast subject. That's my lifetime goal. Hopefully I won't ever become the subject of a podcast. So But
hey, if you do, I will talk about it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, Andy.
Well, Amber, quit saying Ambi. Oh my God. No.
Ambro. I told you if we don't go Ambi, we go Ambro.
No, one of my cousins messaged me the other day and she's like, what is up with this Ambi? And then Sherry, who was our other best friend from school, she messaged me. She's like, what is up with this Ambi? And I'm like, don't even get me started. Don't even get me started.
It's like Bambi.
Yeah. It's like,
I love it.
Yes.
Well, we've got, you want to wrap up now?
Yes, I guess we should wrap up. Even though I just now feel like I'm getting in the groove of things.
I know.
So we'll have to do another one really soon, which I think we will. I think I have the next one, which is coming up in.
Ready?
Yeah. It's coming up in a few days. Yes, it'll be ready.
I think we decided collectively to try to put out 2 a week, right? No.
I think
at least
you
one a week.
But... that. Yeah.
No, we'll see what we can get into.
We'll put out 2 when we can, and I'm definitely ready this week with the one that I'm working on. So we'll have something for you guys. But we do appreciate you listening, and I hope this cleared up some of the mysteries that have surrounded the unknown grave off of 116. And even though we don't really have a definitive answer for you, because nobody does, we are actively searching for that. So if you have information, please let us know. And we would love to do a follow-up if new information comes available. I mean, we have several things that we'll be following up on in the coming months, like Ruby Stapleton, and we're going to do probably another Falk Monster one later on this summer, maybe after I drag Lisa to Monster Mart. But so if you have, you're going
or stay tuned for White River Monster, who could be a cousin to the Falk Monster, maybe.
Yes.
You never know.
I don't think they're cousins. Isn't one a water monster? Hey, I don't have a degree in cryptozoology, but I at least know that the Falk Monster is probably not related to the White River Monster.
But they're both monsters.
They're both monsters. That's the only thing they have in common.
Maybe.
Okay, so that's all we have. Thank you guys very much for listening.
And yes, and rate and review and do all the stuff and reach out to us. Yes. Love ya.